Well, does noticing that someone is attractive automatically qualify as lusting? And has the church set a low standard for men in our ability to walk in sexual integrity? Well, this is Jason for Soulfire. Here on this channel, we want to talk about gospel hope for a porn-filled world. And this is episode 4 of my series covering The Great Sex Rescue, a book by author Sheila Gregory, where she covers a number of myths that are perpetuated in popular teaching and popular books within the church that are preventing us from living lives of integrity, having fulfilling and intimate marriage relationships, and dating relationships. So be sure to subscribe if you want to catch the rest in this series. She's got some awesome content. You can check out the book linked in the description. But one of the things that she says here is that there's a lot of popular teaching within the church that communicates that men can't not look. She talks about one of the most popular books that was ever sold, which was Every Man's Battle. I know that was a book that I read when I was in college, and how it basically says men are constantly struggling with looking. And some of this teaching can even go so far as to question someone's masculinity if they're not actively struggling with lustful thoughts and lustful behavior. And what this builds in men is a don't look mentality, which is wherever you're going, you're focusing on just don't look, have your eyes down at the ground, and you're constantly focusing on this concept of not looking. But one of the things that does is it trains men to believe that women are a danger to them, and it kind of treats women as objects of temptation rather than whole persons. But is it true that men can't not look? And if so, is this don't look a winning strategy for living lives of integrity? She says on page 81, quote, "Too often it seems to us books that talk about lust equate noticing a woman is beautiful with lusting after her. But is noticing actually lusting?" And she goes on to say that sexual attraction alone should not be qualified as lusting. Well, what do you think? Do you think noticing somebody is attractive is a sin that must be avoided? Let me know in the comments section. You know, I feel like I really agree with what she's saying, that we should be able to notice and appreciate beauty and attractiveness. She says on page 83, is it possible to notice a woman is beautiful and even to feel a flash of attraction and then to think nothing more of it and go on about your day? And yes, I think that should be possible. However, there's a problem here. If you would say, listen, I can't do that. Whenever I'm around people, I'm constantly lusting, I'm constantly attracted and falling into tempting thinking and thoughts, then I would say what that indicates is that you've built a habit in your life of constantly looking and trying to gratify those fleshly desires. I know because I've been there. In fact, if you've caught much of this channel at all, I talk about a 10-year period of addiction, and I talk about some of those habits that were ingrained and built into my life. And one of the things I know about pornography is that if we're consuming that type of content, it is training us to constantly be trying to gratify those sexual thoughts and sexual thinking. So then wherever you go out in public, you're going to be treating people in the same way, that they are objects for our pleasure. So sexual addiction brings with it a compulsion, a habit, a training of our brain where we're constantly scanning and looking and trying to satisfy that lust. And she talks about this book Through a Man's Eyes, which was written to attempt to show women what men are thinking and what it's like. And some of the problems I have with this book is it's telling you what some men are like. It's not telling you what all men are like. So it's very difficult to say all men think the same way, because let me tell you, a man who's walking in integrity does not look at a woman the same way that a man who is a sex addict does. They've built different habits into their lives. But the book Through a Man's Eyes describes men who are at work who spend their entire days trying to avoid lusting at the women that they work with, and they try to ignore them and not be around them. And what that shows is it's an example of an ingrained habit or a compulsion, a fixation that this person is stuck on, where they're constantly scanning and looking around for an object of lust. But what we should never communicate is that that is normal, and that's how all men operate, and that no man could break out of that sinful thinking. If we communicate that, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you tell your young men and your young women that, hey, this is how men think, then they're going to believe this is how all men think. But it's not true. God has given us what we need. He's empowered us with His Spirit. We can walk in integrity. We can grow. We can change. We can break out of destructive habits and patterns. You see, I want to communicate to my sons, to the men that are in my ministry, that integrity is possible. I want to communicate to my daughters and to the women that are in our ministry that you can find a man who walks in integrity. You can find a man who is doing what is necessary to live in a way that is honoring God. Now, if you like the sound of that, Please like this video. It helps the channel to grow, helps this message to spread. You see, in the same way that it is possible to build a habit of looking and lusting and treating people like objects, it's also possible to break out of those habits, to treat people like whole persons, to not get in the habit of looking for lustful intentions. But let me call a quick timeout here, because if you hear me saying that and you're like, how do I do that? I'm not capable of doing that. Let me remind you of the beauty of the gospel, that we sin, we struggle, but God is gracious and merciful, that God has provided Christ. He was the one who did it correctly. He was the one who never sinned or never failed. He did that in our place. The beauty of the gospel is it takes my sins and it takes my struggles and I can leave them at the foot of the cross. But the grace of God is empowering me to live a new life, a life powered by the Spirit, where I break out of some of those old and bad habits. Now, it is not easy, but it is possible. And so if this is hard for you, understand you've built some habits that are ingrained. You can break out of them. It won't be easy, but you can do it. So what is the key? How can we honor people, appreciate attraction, appreciate beauty, without moving on to lustful thinking? Because we know the solution is not to live in a cave and to never see another human being. Well, she says on page 91, quote, "Defeating lust is not about limiting a man's encounters with women. It's about empowering men to treat the women around them as whole people, daughters of Christ." And I love that quote right there. We need to treat other women as daughters of Christ. We need to treat other men as sons of God. Treat them as whole persons. Appreciate them as a relationship. Enjoy that friendship and intimacy that can be experienced through non-sexual affection and friendship. You see, this is the habit that you want to build. Now, how can we go there? Well, one of my encouragements would be make sure you're not consuming media that is lighting a fire of sexual passion and sexual temptation in your life. If you're consuming pornography, if you're watching that type of content, it is going to train your brain to treat people just like you're treating those that are on the screen, as objects for your lust. In fact, Proverbs 27:20 says, "Hell and destruction are never full, so the eyes of man are never satisfied." Your eyes will never be satisfied. If you try to feed them, it will only want more and more and more. But secondly, we should also practice non-sexual intimacy and relationship building. This is where community is so powerful. This is where the church can come in, where it has co-ed groups, co-ed small groups. It has fellowship and community involvement where you can get to know people, build friendships, hang out with people, not for the purpose of dating, not for the purpose of finding someone to lust after, but for the purpose of experiencing people as sons and daughters of God, people who we can relate to, not try to use and take from, people we can love and serve. Ultimately, that's the key for breaking out of some of this destructive thinking. Well, what do you think? Have you seen some of these messages perpetuated within the church? Let me know in the comments if there are some better strategies for avoiding lustful thinking. Subscribe if you want to see the next video covering the Great Sex Rescue. And if you have found this video helpful, would you share it with one friend who you think could benefit from the message? This is Jason for Soulfire, and I'll catch you in the next one.